application. Please ensure that you sign in for Ridgeline. It's a requirement that everybody signs in. We have name tags this week. We have coffee. Feel free to get up and get something to drink if you are so inclined. My name's Darren Cara. This is Matt Panhans. Thank you. And online we have Andy Newton, one of the other members and leaders here in Novolog. He is currently in Bangkok for IETF. If he didn't mention this, I'm going to give a shout out to Andy. He is now the arts director for IETF. He's the area director for applications. So congratulations to him. He's not just a pretty face up here. He actually does hardcore internet engineering. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. IETF is the Internet Engineering Task Force. It's early. It helps with a lot of protocol design and what we do on the internet. It's where some ideas come up and how they either create new protocols or extend certain protocols like DNS to jam absolutely everything into them, right?
A lot of sources for your RFCs.
Yes. Yeah, our RFCs. If you hear RFC, it's tightly connected to the IETF. Here you go. I'll handle these if you want to just walk around.
Oh, wow. Okay, that'd be nice.
You're free from the laptop, just say.
All right, welcome all to the March meeting. I guess you covered a lot of the. Did you talk about parking?
Go ahead and talk about parking. Being streamed.
So, if you need your parking ticket validated, what do they do? Talk to.
See this gentleman in the back, and why can't I remember your name? Ron. So I should know Ron because I have a brother, Ron.
Ron, thank you. Yeah, so please see Ron. He can help out with parking, and.
And now we'll just follow the slides here. I'm sure everything will be.
Yeah.
Meeting notes.
So meeting notes we have. I think Andy set it up really nicely on the Novolog website, so that there's an opportunity there. I think we haven't used that tool as much, but it's a pretty neat tool. So anyone can go and collaborate and add things. So we can kind of share links and additional notes there. I think that's good. Next slide. Here is a quick rundown of the resources we have. I think, of course, our website is the main place and the most useful thing. There's the mailing list, which is how I think a lot of us were originally keeping in touch and finding the group. And then there's a presence on the Fediverse through Mastodon, and then also Discord and LinkedIn. And so this might also be a good chance before we jump into the other stuff to do some news stuff. So like, for example, job news. If anyone has a job opening, or should we do icebreakers first? Let me do the news first, and then we'll jump into the icebreakers. So, does anyone know of a job opening that they want to mention? Yes, sir.
Aaron, the American Registered Radar Numbers, is looking for a senior security engineer right now.
Okay, senior security engineer. Anyone interested? Talk to David.
Yeah, if he's smart, he's coming back to that job. I think his title's probationary with the NSA or wherever he went, but.
Anyone else?
Not currently, but I may have a position next time to announce.
Keep us posted.
Yeah. Is anybody looking currently and needs? Yeah. Okay. You're hooked in with me. I'll help you find something definitely. But between all of us, we all have good networks. Having just gone through the job hunting this past year, it's tough, especially when you might have a little bit of gray in your hair or your beard and things like that. With my network, I was really surprised how long it took me to land the job. And I landed it within the year. I mean, I got laid off in May. But it's a real challenge for any of us older people right now, probably for everybody. So if you need help, reach out around the room. Definitely to me, I can usually find somebody in most industries to at least get you talking to. So I'm always happy to help.
Thanks, Darren. Anyone else want to mention if they're looking for something new and what kind of skills they are hoping to use. Okay, we'll leave it there. And then just any other news that anyone wants to share, either local events or anything kind of going on
Go ahead,
in
man.
technology,
I
open
think
source.
somebody mentioned it here last month. What did you say? The NUG, the
The Virginia Networking User Group. Yeah, so there's the U.S. Network User Association, who comes out with these local events. In our case, it's the Sorry, I don't do well with like talking in front of people. So the U.S. Networking User Association comes out with local groups. In our case, the Virginia Networking User Group. It's hosted once a quarter. They've had 4 so far. The fifth one is tentatively in April. They haven't officially announced it yet. But basically, it's a bunch of network engineers coming together to talk about, I mean, it's similar to this. It's a NUG instead of a lug. It's just generally networking instead of Linux. But it inevitably goes into network automation, AI right now, Linux. I mean, it's just a different group of people. But anyways, super fun. Yeah, y'all should check it out.
I was just gonna say, could you either email or
he gave it to me, so I'll put it either in
Discord?
one of our ways to
everywhere else?
the mailing
Okay.
list probably most people hit it.
Cool.
But thank you, Jason. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Oh, it's all good.
Not only are you going to learn here, but you're going to grow.
Awesome. Anyone else have other kind of events or news they wanted to highlight for a group? Yeah. Oh.
Ron? Yeah. I remembered your name. Yeah. Somebody is downstairs.
Okay, got it.
Please and thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, let's jump into some icebreaker for this meeting. We're doing some memes that were submitted. If you have any, if you're the one who submitted it or have any comment, feel free. Sometimes I don't fully understand all of the geek memes, so if anyone has comments, it sometimes could be helpful. So here we go. Yes. Notepad, Control C,
I don't know about
Control
the
V.
Notepad exe part, but Vi, exactly. This
I
is.
mean, if you gotta use a Windows app, then Notepad.
Oh, right. I mean, you don't want to go too crazy with it.
Listen, if you don't have 200 tabs open in Notepad++, you're doing it wrong.
All right, what's our next one here? So this is how software projects are managed. Sounds
Yes. No.
about right.
Yeah,
Next.
and sometimes they pull that date in on you too. The absolutely made up date that they are shooting for.
Vacuum cleaner, yes.
That's reusable with a lot of vendors.
Yeah.
Should we just have stickers made up?
I don't always clear my calculator, but when I do hit both C and CE. Good. Okay. Call for presentations. So this meeting, we are not doing a keynote talk. We'll do some kind of lightning talks and then kind of a gear swap and other discussion. It's a little bit more informal, but typically we will have a kind of a keynote talk, but it can vary a lot in what it looks like. And so if you're interested at all, I think we're super flexible in the length. We're super flexible in the level of sophistication, I'll say. The last few talks we had were people who were professionals in a certain field, and so they gave very long and very polished talks, which were super interesting, and that is great. But we're also very open to other things. If it's more of a hobby thing, you have just a short thing you want to share with the group, something you're really interested in. We're pretty open. I think the one thing is we hope that it stays about kind of open source, Linux, free software, free knowledge type of stuff. But that's kind of really the only requirement. So,
Good morning,
yeah.
welcome. yourself comfortable. No, I don't need a microphone. Never needed one. Thank you for signing in. Thank you for joining us today.
So if you are interested in giving a talk, get in touch with me or Andy, Darren, anyone, and we can talk about that and when it might happen. I think on the next slide we have the current schedule. We have planned for next month will be April, a talk on the state of Linux on mobile, some of the history and current state, and that will be a talk given by myself. And after that, I don't think we have things scheduled. So for May or for the summer, if you are interested, we could definitely slot people in onto the schedule for the summer. So I think that's where we are for presentations. Yes, help spread the word. So we are no longer using the meetup.com page, which had been active for a while. So we've tried to develop a few other ways to kind of get in touch, follow Novolug, but a big part of that is all of us and all of you to just kind of spread the word, invite someone to next month's talk or one of the future talks. And I guess I would say we're also looking for kind of volunteers to help out. I think some people have stepped up, which has been really, really great to have help running the meetings, organizing the meetings, having the streaming. Thank you, Tim. But we could use more, so if you feel so inclined, please also get in touch with us as well.
What kind of roles are you looking for?
I think kind of anything, but Andy is doing a lot, and so just kind of even helping him.
To help Andy.
Yeah. You want to be a secretary? We have that role available for you. But no, I think it's a good point. We can't all always be here. Right now Andy's, like it says, in Bangkok. It very easily could have been that I wasn't going to be here. My wife flew in last night from basically being away for 2 weeks. So, sometimes, you although being available, you have to choose between being here and doing other things. Just, another warm body that could help, bring people in, greet, whatever, fight with the HDMI on the weekly battle. We could always, and if you're here every weekend, anyway, or every month, sorry, we're happy to let you take part in the madness that is the monthly Novolug.
Yeah, I think a big part of it too is kind of scheduling our talks. I think that's kind of an important thing that takes a little effort to kind of reach out to people, find good people. So even just willing to do that a little bit, brainstorm which topics might be good, that could be helpful. Okay, so I think then. Are we going into Lightning Talks? Yeah.
There's one thing I want to add to this. Not just help spread the propaganda, but invite a friend. Bring somebody every time you can. Mention this to people because it's good to get together. It's good to have community. Back to if for nothing else, than commiserate about job markets or how terrible my day-to-day work is, or how the pointy-haired boss makes my job twice as hard as it should be. But the other thing is not just inviting friends. I've recently been appointed to a couple committees at NANOG, and one is for welcoming people, bringing people into a community, making sure they come back. And part of that, and I'll go ahead and say DEI because I'm still big on DEI, and we all know what it means, and I'm always going to use that term. But I see way too many people like me, which I think is a problem. NANOG faces similar things. There are less and less women joining tech or feeling they can come into a technical situation. The numbers here might reflect that also. So, let's foster a new generation that, doesn't, all look like me or him, though you're a little better looking than me. I just wanted to put a plug in for DEI and that it's still important in the community as a whole, especially as a lot of us age out. We need to bring in younger talent of all varieties because everybody's technical skills and points of view have value. So thank you.
Yes, please.
Talks have to be Linux specific or just tech?
As he said, if we can lean into the Linux and or open source, or else we're just some nug, right?
Yeah, like no Windows talk.
Unless it's Linux on Windows somehow, I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
Talk about FreeBSD, I don't think
Oh,
have a problem, but
I mean, there are
Yeah.
other forms for FreeBSD, but yeah, just operating systems that aren't Windows in general. I mean, I don't think anybody's going to throw things when we've had FreeBSD and so forth discussions. Because yes, sir.
I have a Windows comment. This last weekend, I was at a thrift store. I bought a Windows 10 computer for $6. Little mini. The thing's great, man. It's like 5 years old. $6. Totally gonna put Linux on it, but you know, not leaving that crap on there.
You going to be up first then if we're heading into the Lightning Talks?
Oh, if we want to play the HDMI game, yeah. Sure.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to need a laptop for mine, so come on up. Oh, is yours already on the?
No. I prepared it last night, so it's not anywhere.
Typical conference etiquette. Did Hollis ask for the slides 6 weeks ago?
Well, no, Andy messaged me
Here, I can move that one.
about, I think earlier this week, and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it or not with work stuff going on. And then last night I was like, I could definitely make it. I should probably present something since he asked for it.
So while you're getting that set up, I'll just say, so because we had some people come in a little bit after we got started, that we're not going to do a typical keynote this month. We're going to do a set of lightning talks that'll be shorter, and I think we have a couple lined up. So David is going to talk, and then Darren, you were going to talk a little bit, and is anyone else interested or willing? Yeah. Oh, okay. Sure. Okay.
I have a bag of experiments.
A bag of experiments.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Great. So we'll do.
Yeah, I'm in. I don't even know what it is.
I was almost physics major.
Okay. Great. So we're kind of looking for up to like 10 minutes, just kind of a quick thing. Share a little bit.
Can you introduce a few high-performance projects?
Okay. Great. Yeah. Some high performance projects. Okay. So that would be 4. That seems good. Okay. So let's.
on just cubes OS.
Sure.
So that's like security, like VM, pair virtualization. That's a conversation.
Okay. That sounds like a good set. That would be great. We can do some short talk. So we'll start with David. Take it away. Thanks.
So, as he said, David, I'll get into where I am. But the parameters I had for this talk were, hey, what do you use Linux for? And I was like, all right, I'll talk about Linux stuff. So briefly, I'll talk about day job. I'm a principal SRE over at Aaron. That involves managing a bunch of DNS infrastructure, Postgres clusters, and trying to put Kubernetes into anything that I can. And occasionally I get to do some offsite network engineering where I pretend I'm a network engineer. We set up ad hoc networks at some meetings that we hold for the community where they do a bunch of decisions for how the direction of Aaron's going to go and where things are at the time, etc. And so just here we get to go to pretty destinations sometimes. That's Barbados. And while that's pretty, the network closet wasn't as pretty, but that was what we were working with. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. Also not here to talk about too much about the home lab, but this is something that I do a lot of Linux stuff with. So I run a pretty fun little Raspberry Pi Kubernetes cluster. It just recently grew to not just having Raspberry Pis in it because I need a little bit more performance than what I was getting. But that's something that I do as a practice bed for certification. Sometimes I do a lot of device implementation with it. So things like actually you can see it here. The controllers here are used for some home automation. It's a Z-Wave stick and a Zigbee stick. So it interacts with devices that aren't necessarily networked, but can use a different protocol to communicate. And those are mounted into containers and then interact with my home automation. which is listed down there. It's self-hosting. Do a lot of home assistant work. I think someone here last time I was here in December was a pretty avid home assistant user. But that controls things like lighting in my house and robot lawnmower and a bunch of other fun stuff. So anything else that you would picture someone doing self-hosting with is something I'm probably running in that cluster. So 3D printing management through Octoprint, home surveillance with all my cameras tied into something called Frigate, which does some pretty good event detection of, oh, there's some object there. And speaking of devices, there's a device plugged into a different Pi that's not pictured here that will offload. It's a Google Coral USB. So it does some cool machine learning detection stuff based on pre-trained models that they have. And that will then send a notification to my phone if it detects something in somewhere that it shouldn't be, or somewhere that it's a surprise. So that's a fun way to use Linux. And then something that I've been picking up recently is buzzword warning, a lot of LLM work. So I've got an external GPU that's a 3090 that connects to the new computer that I talked about. It's a GMK Tech little NUC box thing. And that runs some LLM work. And so that's both with something called OpenWeb UI, which is sort of similar to ChatGPT, but it's an open source alternative that can connect to things like to Olama and allows you to do that kind of work. Or some other things that I've got is that Frigate surveillance that I was talking about also sends some snapshots to Olama, which then interprets that and gives me a sort of detailed analysis of what's in the picture. Because the original just says, okay, is there a cat? Is there a dog? Is there a person? But then it will actually tell me, oh, there's a delivery person on the front porch, and I'll get that smart notification to my phone. Not what I talk about, but I talked about it anyway. What I am here to talk about is Halloween. So if you were here in December, I brought a little ventriloquist doll, which was an animatronic that I made, and the skull, the skeleton that you see here. It's a little bit of a different skull, but pretty similar. So every year, my wife and I do a fairly significant, large-scale Halloween display. That generally involves lots of thrift store shopping. We try to do reclaimed materials when we can, lots of DIY, so I pretend like I know what I'm doing with woodworking. And it's a fun opportunity to put Linux into weird places. So I swear this is related to Linux in some way. We do a new theme annually, although that will stop probably after 5 years because we only have so much garage space. When this gets pushed up to the notes, I imagine you can be able to click these links. These are just links to the videos that I've made for these various displays. So the problem set behind Halloween with Linux. So a lot of store-bought animatronics generally are kind of cheap looking. They can sound bad because they have these really bad looking speakers that don't really get a lot of power. They're very tinny, not a lot of bass sound to it. It's just not very spooky sounding. And we want to do something that is, not intimidating because it is for kids, but it should be sort of imposing, right? The whole premise that we're trying to go for is something that's scary that a kid can brave up and come up and get a full-size candy bar for.
I disagree, sir. If you have not traumatized that child, the proper childhood experience.
I will say, I tell people this, that my goal is to have more than one child, but less than 5 children cry. Because if you don't have at least that one little kid that always cries at everything, crying at it, then you don't have a scary enough display. But if you got more than 5, then maybe you're kind of being the neighborhood jerk. So the 1 to 5 number is kind of what I'm targeting there. So beyond that, they can be kind of expensive, especially if you're getting something for multiple different themes like I talked about, and they don't scale to those themes necessarily very well. If you've got like a something that's a good pirate, that's the animatronic that's just a pirate, then that's not going to really work well when you're doing something for scarecrows. So there are a lot of communities that do pretty good DIY animatronic stuff within the Halloween community. There's a bunch of Facebook groups and forums that talk about this kind of thing. And a lot of them recommend prosumer type controllers that you can get from sites like Fright Props, where they're little pre-made little boxes that you connect a bunch of things to. And they're, for what they are, they're not super expensive, but they're relatively expensive. And that can scale pretty heavily price-wise if you're getting a lot of different devices implemented. And so it's something that I wanted to say, okay, can I do something with Linux that will sort of solve this problem? And something that works pretty well in this kind of situation, a Raspberry Pi. So it's not pictured here, but it is a niche subject. So there's not a lot of open source software that's geared towards this type of thing. You can't just go into GitHub and find a plethora of projects that are geared towards getting a nice Halloween display. They do exist. This one is one that I've used a couple different times called ChatterPie, and I did have to modify it. I probably should put up a branch and submit some pull requests or something. But essentially, it is a Python script that will allow you to play audio, and then based on the volume of that audio, will react a servo to that audio. And that can be done through a Raspberry Pi GPIO, the general purpose input output. So wire a bunch of servos up to a Raspberry Pi, or if you have a bunch of servos, you can do a Pi hat that has it's an Arduino hat where you can have multiple servos controlled off of that one device, but you have to give it a little more power, especially if you've got some big servos going on. But in all fairness to the fact that there's not a lot of software geared towards this, there's a lot of variety in how people do DIY Halloween displays. That can be some sort of pneumatic device. It can be a servo. It can be controlled by a Raspberry Pi or something that's probably better suited for it, frankly, is an Arduino, just something I don't have a lot of experience in. And then you can be controlling tiny little motors, or you can be controlling windshield wiper motors. This guy is something that I built for 1 year, where there is a windshield wiper motor, and that's a very commonly used device for this type of work. It's buried in this box, and all it does is just spin around at a given speed, and it makes him look like he's digging. So there's like I said, a lot of varieties, but there's probably some room for centralizing on this. The next thing is a video. Is there audio to this, or is it going to be really loud if I play to it? Oh.
Are there other devices like that motor that people would commonly choose for animatronics?
That's a good question. So the most common thing that I've seen, or at least used myself, is just generic servos. There's such a wide variety of servos that you can't really say, oh, okay, this is the servo to look for. And then even if you find a model that you like, the consistency as to whether you're going to find that in more than one place can be kind of annoying. So, but I would say servos is a pretty common one, and then some sort of...
Say that, and this is more for like Christmas time, I've seen a lot of people use the pancake motors from 3D printers, because you can typically get those pretty dirt cheap from AliExpress.
You reminded me of another one that gets used pretty frequently. So around Christmas time, you'll see those reindeer that have that are just white light sort of structures, and they've got like little motors that move their heads. People will use old motors that they'll rip out from the reindeer, and they use those I think they just call them reindeer motors. So that is another commonly used one. And then something I haven't gotten into, so I can't speak to how widely used it is or how standardized it is, but a lot of pneumatic devices are used. So, but I don't have any sort of air compressor and all that stuff like hooked up to do that correctly and safely, so I haven't really done it. But the pneumatic devices are pretty common. So yeah, sometimes open source can help here. If the audio starts getting really loud here, I'm sorry.
I just lowered the audio a little bit.
Okay.
It might still be pretty loud, so everybody be prepared.
Okay.
Even if it does work.
So I'm going to just show off a few of the things that I've made over time. And This guy doesn't have any Linux in it, but all the rest of the ones I'm showing off do have some Linux or open source involved here. Excellent, no audio, even better. So this was a fortune teller. This was part of a sort of a circus freak show type theme that we were doing. And the booth here was supposed to look like a fortune teller booth. And inside of the fortune teller, there was a klaxon horn. If you don't know what a klaxon horn is, it's the sound that you make. That's that you find in like old cars. So took a klaxon horn, hooked it up to and shame I don't have a picture of this, but sorry, I just put this together last night. It's a Raspberry Pi hooked up to a breadboard, which controls a relay, and the relay is hooked up to a 12-volt battery and some wires that hook up to that klaxon horn. So I had let's see if we pull it back up here. Had a little app a little Flask app that ran on the Raspberry Pi, and my wife had a phone that she could hold, had a little press button thing, so she could, if someone was walking by, press on the little button and spook someone walking by. We did it that way versus motion activated because we didn't want just everybody walking by to set it off. Kind of wanted to make it, sort of sparing, and also didn't want to necessarily have like a 2-year-old walking by and then just get blared in their ears. So it was a nice sort of control to keep things calm, but also use it when it made sense. As with everything, when you start running in production, this caused some heartache for me. I found out that the basement Wi-Fi doesn't really reach certain parts of my yard. So when this got far enough away, or when there was some sort of interference, the connection between the device and the Wi-Fi got to a point where it would not be necessarily responsive. So occasionally, if you set off the horn, it would take that motion and it would start activating, and it's going to make it, but then the release didn't get communicated, so it just kept on. So I didn't have any switches built in or anything like that to like toggle it off or anything. So I'd have to run over, scramble, disconnect things randomly from the breadboard. But this was really my first entry into doing something like this, and it was fun. Really, I think it was my first time really doing a lot of work with the Raspberry Pi's GPIO. So pretty fun little project. The other bad part of this was it rained this year. So had to really try to find a way to get this somewhat watertight. Fortunately, it was kind of covered by this sort of platform. It's built into this box, but I wanted to avoid getting any sort of rain on it. So it didn't work 100% because of all that, but it did get a couple people, which was nice. The next year was a pirate theme. The unfortunate part of this year was I was scrambling because I was short on time. I had gotten COVID like that month, and so like a week of my time was just gone. And like really my Octobers are like very dedicated as much as possible to getting Halloween stuff up. Go ahead.
For this pirate theme, is the laptop loaded with BitTorrent, FireWire, Napster?
So the laptop is there showing that I was frantically on Halloween day troubleshooting in production, because it was just like, why isn't this working? I gotta get this up. It is what let's see. So I've got a Raspberry Pi here hooked up to this big old extension board, a mess of cables and resistors that then talk to this device. So this skull was sort of reclaimed. Someone was giving away I think it was some sort of like, I don't know, it was a mounted skeleton arm thing. It was not great looking, but it was perfect for having something that would sit there and say, "Dead men tell no tales." So he synced his little Python script that just played audio, and it didn't move the jaw with the music. It moved at a time frequency that I figured out and manually programmed in to just hit play. So it worked for that purpose and stayed synced up, but it wasn't super smart. But it did work, and it sat there and jabbered all night. So that was a pretty good one. Again, video link from that will show the sort of prototype. since there's no audio, there's not really much point in me clicking, but essentially the jaw just opens and shuts. The next year, which was this past year, 2024, we did a Goosebumps theme. And this was the smaller animatronic that I built for this. So I took I think it's a Charlie McCarthy doll is what it's called. So it was a big ventriloquist doll in the sort of like the 80s, 70s. Something that there was I forget who the name of the actor or the ventriloquist person was, but it was a pretty big thing back in the day, supposedly. But people sell them on eBay, and so I was finding anything that I could that looked in decent enough quality, like not broken out, and like maybe I could get the mechanism to actually work. So I bought like 3 of them and showed them to my dog. One of them was deathly afraid of them. The other one just walked right up to it and sniffed it. So took it, painted it, and 3D printed a little torso here. That is a hollowed out chest that took over the chest cavity, which was just full of just generic stuffing of some sort. And by the way, I made sure to kind of be careful with it. I was concerned with how old some of these were. I had like lead testing kits to make sure there was no lead paint or anything. Partially because, for my own sake, but also because, it's something that's going to be out for, near kids. So I was like, I don't want somebody to mess with it. And unfortunately, a whole bunch of kids did actually touch them. And I was like, stop touching them. So I'm glad that I try to take some safety precautions when I can. So yes, filled him up with that 3D printed torso. That allowed me to, because he was hollow out, put a little Raspberry Pi Zero, a battery, and a small Bluetooth speaker to hook up to a small servo that controlled the sort of pull mechanism that would open and shut his mouth. And that was synced completely with the audio. So I generated some audio files of the voice from the original show. And actually, it wasn't from the original show. It was the voice that I ended up using was actually the voice of the ventriloquist character from Batman the Animated Series from back in the 90s. That was what I used as the sort of basis to then put into the training program to say, okay, give me some output of him saying something. Again, troubleshooting production. Anyone experienced with Linux can probably guess the problem I had day of with Slappy. It was Linux audio. So I was having some problems connecting to the Bluetooth speaker, even though reliably I could get it working multiple times that week. Ironically, the fix was just restarting the Pi. So the last animatronic from this previous year was sort of a bigger one. My slideshow is going to go. There it goes. So the 12-foot animatronics, the 12-foot skeleton is a big common thing from Home Depot. I got it for Christmas. I think my wife got it for Christmas from my parents a few years ago. We were like, well, how can we implement this into a Goosebumps theme? Because it's a big thing, a big presence in the yard. People liked it when it was dressed as a pirate. But we were like, what can we do with it for a Goosebumps theme? Because while there are some skeleton themes within Goosebumps, there wasn't something that would fit a sort of a Goosebumps book cover, which was kind of what we were doing in the display. Again, I encourage you to check out the links from that go to YouTube from one of the earlier slides. But what we decided on was let's print out a giant Goosebumps book, have him hold it. He was holding it. It was very windy that day, so it sort of flapped out of there. So we just had to put it on the ground. And what I did was follow a project that, again, open source. Someone did I think it was a Hackaday post, and they broke down how they took the original 12-foot skeleton head, carved it out, 3D printed a structure that could hold a bunch of servos that allowed it to have a 3-axis rotation, so it could look side to side, it looks up and down, and they added I think it has a tilt action as well. And in addition to the 3-axis, it has the ability to move its mouth. The original 12-foot skeleton head is not particularly scary, but they came out with a new head that's a little scarier looking. So while I had a basis for creating this, I did have to make a whole bunch of modifications to fit that new device. So it's something that I need to write up and put out there to encourage others to do the same. But let me see if I can get I have a video of that.
So when do you have time for your day job?
As I said, my Octobers are generally pretty full. Is this going to, oh, I might have to exit the presentation. Give me one moment. Back to Linux audio. Let's see if this will work. Well, I've got the audio coming through here. So yeah, it worked. I used that ChatterPie GitHub library that I mentioned earlier to actually control that mechanism. So when he was reading out, when the voice was activated, it would, of course, stop playing. The mouth would move, and there it goes. So the mouth would move, and I programmed an additional little Python script that made the head move back and forth as if it were reading. That was or presenting to a group, and that worked pretty well. It worked all night. I was stoked because the first time that I actually got to test it was the night of, and it worked perfectly. I had pretty good results, pretty good reactions to that from the neighborhood. Both the adults and the kids were pretty happy with that and really grasped what he was doing, right? The fact that he was reading a book. The voice that you can't hear because it's playing through here, not through the HDMI speakers, is the voice of Vincent Price, the guy who did the introduction to Thriller amongst a bunch of other acting. Let me get back to the presentation.
Okay, so this year the head's gonna rotate 360 flames.
You're giving me an excellent transition. Let me see if I can get to that.
Yeah, you want to scare all the children. Exorcist theme for next year.
Speaking of traumatizing.
I'm just gonna drag this over. That's gonna be easier. So the future, what does that hold in terms of what am I gonna do in the future to make this a better? Because I do want to iterate on all of the themes that we've done. Even if they've done it before, it should be done better. So some good sort of ways forward with the 12-foot guy is, what if he could follow movement? If I can build some sort of camera system that could then track an object that's in its view, so it's looking at it while talking to whatever that object is. Would be excellent. Interactivity. What if it can hear what people are saying and respond to them? Image recognition. So what if it, when it's walking by, can see, oh, hey, you're a unicorn, and start talking to someone or something along those lines. In addition to that, oh man, I had something else that I wanted to bring up, but it's escaping me right now. But essentially, yeah, when you do it with some sort of open source software and you're building off of a Pi versus a bunch of pre-baked sort of devices, then you do have a lot of possibilities to go through. And that's it. So, any questions?
Maybe we'll do questions kind of afterwards so we can get through a few of
Absolutely.
the talks. Darren, would you be willing to go next?
Some volunteers on that side of the room a minute ago.
Yeah, should we go there first?
I'm filler and can always go in anywhere.
Oh, okay.
I think there was Cubes OS and the other person had something that sounded interesting too, but Bag of Tricks, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine too. Yeah. We have a volunteer?
Yeah,
You
go for it.
just-
Appreciate it.
You can just do a quick little over. Did you have even slides?
No,
or-
I
Oh,
was
okay.
just going to show off cubes by
Oh,
showing
okay.
the cubes I actually run it.
Yeah. So can you tell me your name?
Yeah, my name is Aaron.
Aaron. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction. This is not my first time doing lug talks.
Okay.
I actually came from
All right.
the Virginia Tech lug. But then I
Okay.
moved
Let me
out
give
here.
you this. So we'll welcome Aaron, and I'll give you the mic handed to you for a bit.
Hey. Oh, that's nice. It's 3D printed. Rode Go Pro 2. Okay, yeah, that's awesome. So I came from the Linux and Unix users group down at Virginia Tech. And this is my first time coming here because I was like, oh, why not? I'll check it out, see how it goes. And I have no clue if this is even going to work at all because I've never actually done screencasting on Cubes, which uses Fedora underneath the hood, for a lot of the stuff. So we'll see if this even, yeah, it's probably not going to. Let's see if I have to do some weird Xrandar stuff. And worse, I use i3 Orn cubes. So it's non-standard or non-standard, but it'll be fine. Basically, I don't know, does anyone here have ever used cubes before or ever heard of it?
A coworker in Iceland who's trying to sell me on it, and my laptop that's about to show up for the job will support it. I'm not sure if I'm that brave though, but I'm curious to hear more about it used in practice.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he's very security conscious and more so than I am. I mean, I think most of us are security conscious, but yeah, I want to hear the upside of using cubes for my day-to-day job versus just, right now I'm going to run with Ubuntu Linux. So yeah, if you can give some.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background about me. I am currently working at a company called NACWorks. I came from before that doing defense contracting. I was doing IR, so incident response. I used to do basically like tooling. So I used to write and develop tooling for incident response in particular. Now I do basically Kubernetes management, so manage platforms as a service, similar to something like OpenShift. I currently am just a big security advocate, so I just go on and write random pieces of code, do security-related tasks for that type of work. And an interesting part about cubes is that it's basically per various different namespace. So how it works is that you have an operating system that isn't really, so first, we're running Zen. Let's just start there. We're running Zen on your hardware, right? And then from there, you're then able to run whatever operating system you want underneath it, right? Because Zen is not technically an operating system, it's a hypervisor. So you're basically saying, okay, I'm going to use Fedora for your DOM 0. So that's why I actually wanted to show the example of what it is underneath the hood, because it has kind of this whiteboard-esque type style. That is a terrible idea. I should not have tried to move that. Yeah, sorry about that. But basically the idea is that the quote-unquote DOM 0 is...
DOM 0 is what? Domain 0?
Yes, domain 0.
Namespace you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's not really using real Linux namespaces, right? It's using basically, you can do fully virtualized systems, or you can do para-virtualized systems, so containers. I think they're using LXCs underneath the hood, but I don't remember. But basically you have what they call DOM 0, which is domain 0. And everything else kind of runs through DOM 0 for display. So you can have a personal VM. You can have a work VM. You have a network VM. And then you have some type of like firewall VM, etc., right? And basically what you would end up doing is that you would say, oh, I want to display something through DOM 0. Well, to do that display, you basically need to say, hey, I'm going to take the Wayland session, which right now Wayland it's not supported. They only use Xorg because, of course. So we're using an Xorg session with some type of forwarding. So we basically do forwarding of that window into DOM 0. And then with that window, then you might want to be able to copy files. You might want to copy, text, etc. You can copy things into your DOM 0 from a different container or virtual machine. So let's say that you're working on work and then you have something that you want from your personal VM to be brought over to your work VM. Well, they basically let you copy things into a global clipboard from your work VM right here, and then pull that into DOM0. And then from DOM0, you can then take that thing and bring it into your personal VM. And nothing is connected to the internet by default either. So basically what it then means is that if you want to connect to the internet, you have to connect your work VM to sysfirewall, which is connected to sysnet. So I drew this in a terrible way to describe how to do this entirely. But basically they have what you called the sys-VMs, which is just, we put names on everything to make it a little bit easier to see. But you basically say your system VM for your firewall is connected to then your network VM. And then the network VM is the thing that's going to have your Wi-Fi like drivers, your Ethernet drivers, whatever devices. You also have some for USB. So all of your USB devices by default are connected to your USB VM. This is terrible. I regret that. So then you would basically say, let's say I want wireless to work. You would say connect something to the USB VM, right? So you plug in your wireless card, or you have a wireless card connected through PCIe. That then is then connected to your sysnet VM. So it passes over that PCIe device. So you're doing PCIe pass-through. So that means that if you have multiple things from the same, like, Thunderbolt cable or something like that, that can cause some weird issues sometimes. If you're trying to pass through, let's say, a GPU, that can cause some weird issues, that type of thing. But if you are able to do it, for whatever reason, you can basically say, I'm gonna pass through that thing from USB over to your network VM. So in this case, we're talking about Wi-Fi card. And then that network VM now has control over that USB device and can do whatever it wants. Now they also let you do specific types of pass through, because you're thinking yourself, oh, I don't wanna pass through my whole YubiKey or something like that. You can also write basically the equivalent of a driver that will let you pass through specific types of data. So there's a bunch of options to pass around data. There's a bunch of options to pass around visual data. And then you can also do your network data the exact same way. And you can choose to say, okay, as we were talking about before, as I went down the rabbit hole and then came back up in traverse, your work VM is then able to connect through each of these for your networking. And so you can basically say, from here to here, I can see all the places where I can do packet inspection if I wanted to. So if you wanted to, you could do like some Polar proxy or something like that and go on and pull data through and check and make sure things are occurring the way that you expect it to. But you don't have to get that crazy. You can just go on and just say, okay, just give me internet, call it a day, be done with it, right? And then basically, you are able to see everything through DOM0. So whatever you install for your display server, you can use, except for Wayland supported stuff, so no GNOME. But we use XFCE, I think, by default, or i3. Either one's fine. And basically, you can just do that. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, go on.
Quick question. Can you set up different USB ports for different cubes?
Absolutely. So you can set up different USB ports for different cubes. You can set up different USB devices as long as you can do the USB pass-through. So if you ever use the KVM, right, before, and not talking about the keyboard, video, mouse, but KVM as in the virtual machine manager that people use inside of the Linux kernel, that is the way that they kind of do that sort of stuff, if that makes any sense. Sorry, I'm walking back and forth, you poor soul, having to adjust that for me. Bless you. So yes is the answer, you can do that. There are caveats to it, right? So just like anything else, if you have like a USB hub, if the USB hub takes over each of the individual, because you can do basically like USB aggregation. If you do something like that, then it'll be harder to split it back up via cubes. You would have to do that in like a VM, and then you could then distribute that hardware elsewhere. So the answer is yes, asterisks. Any other questions?
Yeah, so looking at this, It would have been great if it could be displayed on the monitor to show us the ease or difficulty with which to set this up. You know, you have lots of boxes there. You have your DOM 0, and then say all you wanted was your work and home PC on top of DOM 0. Is that acceptable configuration? And then what does DOM 0 handle all the interactions with the hardware, and you know, you can load your firewall there, or how you know, how would somebody ease their way into using CubeOS?
Yes, so there is a path to easy integration, and really, that kind of starts with just setting up a basic Cubes install, which is basically the Fedora installer, so it's Anaconda underneath the hood, right? You use Anaconda to install your stuff. You might have to display NVIDIA drivers if you have NVIDIA drivers, so you know, mode set 0 is very common for the start, and then once you get it installed, then you can reinstall the NVIDIA drivers and it'll mostly work. This has NVIDIA drivers, and I don't know what that was. Hey, kind of ish working, cool. Now it's really messed up
NVIDIA
size.
drivers, does CubeOS run on or require
So the real answer is it doesn't require those things, but if you're worried about someone tampering with your device, then you probably should enable some of them or use something called anti-evil made to check and verify your boot. There's various different ways to verify boot, and it's dependent on your laptop or desktop, whatever TPM that you want to use and all that stuff.
You mentioned NVIDIA drivers, so for those the uninitiated, secure boot and NVIDIA drivers with Linux is that's a phrase for it.
Yes, it sure is a phrase for it.
The short version is NVIDIA doesn't sign their drivers, so you have to sign your own drivers, and then inject the signature into your EFI at boot time. So it's not a fun time.
Yeah, the things I would basically say that you shouldn't do with cubes is don't game. Unless you're going to pass through to a Windows VM and then play on the Windows VM, then you're otherwise fine. Yeah, shoot.
What kind of overhead does this all cost? It seems like a lot of virtual machines. So like if you're running on an old enough device, having a keyboard, a mouse, and monitor hooked up to your laptop is going to kill off the
Absolutely.
resources.
I completely agree. I actually started this on a really, really old ThinkPad from my sister who destroyed the screen for it. She was like, oh, here you go. Here's this, like, I think it was in 2011 ThinkPad, but it had 32 gigs of RAM. So really, the answer is CPU, kind of not too bad. RAM, it's very heavy because you're running a bunch of virtual machines. You can pair virtualize stuff, and it will get a little bit better with performance, but like, like that's the real answer. Going back to your question all the way back there, here's a great example of a bunch of different VMs, and I'm just gonna kind of go through and just say, this is how it works. To use cubes up front, the only thing you need is DOM 0, which is that main one, which is what you're seeing here, right? Which is technically all offline, by the way. So how it works is that DOM 0 is offline. Everything else, if you want to connect to the internet, you can. When you want to update DOM 0, they have a specialized updater that you can specify if you want to go through Tor and pull down all your Fedora updates or whatever. And you can technically run anything in DOM 0, but like people who run Gen 2 and DOM 0 run into a lot of issues, for instance. So very much so dependent. Then from there you can say, oh, I want to run a random template. So you can set up these template VMs. So you see how I have a dev template VM, I have a Debian 12 XFCE VM, and I have a Fedora 40 snap and Fedora 40 normal VM that I have as templates. Then you can say, I want to persist data as like basically a layer. So then you can say, oh, I can persist data on top of that, basically like snapshots that you normally see in your VMs. Or you can say, I want non-persistent data, which is a DVM. And you can kind of see one of those, because I actually pulled up all of the stuff from today, and you can see Frigate, because I looked that up, because I was like, that's pretty neat. I want that for my home lab too. But inside of a disposable VM, which is using Tor browser, of course, because why not? It's super easy, it's super simple. You don't have to do anything to set up Tor, you don't have to do anything to set up like your Fedora VMs, anything like that. You kind of just say, hey, start the operating system, and then it will just go and do everything else. Then you just use normal Fedora as usual. So if I wanted to install some software, like it's just as simple as saying sudo dnf install, I don't know, Flatpak. That's whatever. And then, as you can see there, it's installing it. When I restart this VM, Flatpak will go away because it's not persistent for the apps that I'm installing. It's only persistent for the user data. So that then is another layer of security, which is pretty nice. And then, as you can see there, it says notifying DOM0 about installed applications. So if I wanted to go to my personal VM, if I go to the cube settings with settings manager, that's the wrong cube setting, I'm stupid. There we go, right here, settings. Then if I refresh these applications, I'll technically have a Flatpak manager in there. So that's kind of how it works. You can then add and remove stuff to show up inside this top menu for your DOM0, and it's pretty simple outside of that. All this is kind of explained up here on their main website. For those of you that do defense contracting and stuff like that, I'm sorry, because it does in the first couple moments say something about, oh yes, Edward Snowden supports this operating system, and you're just like, okay. But otherwise, you could probably get most of your workplaces to get into using cubes, and it's pretty simple to use.
It's a really considered quote, though.
Yes, yeah, it really is.
What others are saying.
Yeah, it's actually pretty dang good. In
He makes the point, security is all about reducing your attack surface.
His larger opinion is that the more is this for the stream, the more you can reduce the places where you can make a mistake, whether that's taking your backpack with you to the bathroom or out of the hotel room when you leave, those kinds of things add up and dramatically, you're reducing the chance that an attacker may seize.
Absolutely, which goes back to the same thing I was talking about before with the disposable VMs, with the app VMs only having the user storage, etc. All these things are here to minimize your attack surface overall. And so no matter how much I jest about people not being willing to do stuff, it very much so depends on, what your clientele are doing.
I guess, why do you need the overhead of the VM in order to obviously VM does a job here of reducing the attack surface, making sure that the only way to connect to the internet is through a network VM, for example. But is there any compromise you can make besides using the whole VM?
Yeah, so that's why I kind of brought it up earlier. It's a setting that you can use, I think, where is it? Virtualization. So you don't have to do a fully virtualized operating system. So you can do partially virtualized stuff where you're sharing the kernel of your host, right? So that then helps you with a little bit of your memory management, stuff like that if you wish to. It's not full, right? So there's some things that are still an emulation layer, but from my understanding, which by the way, I'm no expert in this. I don't know if anyone realized that as I fooled around and couldn't get my dang thing to display, but this is just from my experience of screwing around with cubes and using it for the past couple of years. It's been pretty seamless to use it. It's a little bit of extra work to get data between point A and point B. You can't just press Control-C, you have to press Control-Shift-C. Wow, crazy, I know. But once you get used to saying, okay, it's okay for these small things to be a little bit harder, then it's pretty simple. And then from the memory side, yeah, I need a little bit beefier hardware, but it's not too terrible overall.
So what's your current ride there? What's your laptop?
Yeah, So this is the Dell XPS 17, I think. They just discontinued this line, which made me very sad. So then I was looking at frameworks, which I'm glad to see that someone's using frameworks in here.
So two questions.
Yeah, sure.
One is, you mentioned DoD. Does this function or will it run under FIPS? And two, are there STIGs for it?
So the answer, I think, is no.
For both?
For both. I've not tried before, right? Because I'm not using this for work. I'm using this for fun and home labbing and stuff like that. But the real answer is, technically speaking, it's KVM underneath the hood, it's Fedora underneath the hood. You could stig all the VMs very easily and then just have templates that are very, baseline. So yes, there, but in terms of the cubes, templates, and all that stuff, I don't think that anyone has done that from my knowledge. I mean, I could have research time and take a look into it. It's a really good question, though.
I'll be loud enough. Is DOM 0 an immutable OS, and is that part of why it's a funky update?
So yes and no. So the real answer is that DOM 0 is technically not immutable. It is, well, I mean, you can see that I'm adding stuff to it, right? I themed this. This is like a dark theme mode. I have, i3 on it, all of that jazz. So it's not quite immutable, and they don't use even by default, what's the name of the thing? I don't remember the name of it, but there's like a configuration manager that will tell you if your operating system has been modified for your etc files, etc configs, and all that stuff, right? I don't remember what those things are off the top of my head, but you kind of get the idea. It's not technically immutable, but you can make it immutable if you wish to by just tweaking a couple different settings, and then nothing would be able to modify it. It would make life a lot harder in a lot of ways if you did that.
I guess I misunderstood. I figured some of the display bits were within another VM, but that's actually within DOM 0.
Yes, so DOM 0 handles your display. I mean, you're kind of right. So the real answer is, right, it's complicated.
I accept that.
So in their, actually, this is their user documentation. I'm looking for the introduction. In here, you can kind of see that some of that is true. So the GUI VM, quote unquote, which is your actual display manager, is technically separate, but then that's usually, from my understanding, within DOM 0. Like, I don't know how they do the pass-through directly. I think that they basically have some like middleware that kind of says, hey, this is where Xorg should be drawing this window, etc., and then everything else is just kind of passed through that middleware. But yeah.
Quick question. I recently picked up a cheap computer, and my plan for it, actually before listening to you, was to set up some Docker stuff, because I figured I was going to do a bunch of Raspberry Pi projects, but instead of buying like 7 or 8 Raspberry Pis, I'll throw it onto this one $6, box that I got. Anyway, but would you, I mean, for something like that where I'd be trying to emulate like 4 or 5 Raspberry Pis, would you suggest this or like Docker or something?
Yeah, based on your constraints, I would probably actually recommend running Minikube or something like that, as long as it's not going in production because it's just one host. And then learning the basics of Kubernetes, because you can host a lot of those applications there. So there are ways to basically do what you're trying to do within cubes, but I think it would be more of like a square peg into a round hole situation where it would work completely, but it would be a lot more painful than it should be to get a basic and more secure setup. So the real answer is yes, you can absolutely do it. And it would be a great learning experience. But if you're trying to take something and make it that way, you can take this between multiple different systems as you go along and you start to do stuff, I would say look at Kubernetes with something like Velero as a backup system. And then that way, as you go and you move between, oh, this small little node's not enough to run my like 20 Docker containers, which in Kubernetes would be like cryo containers or whatever, right? But wherever OCI container compliant runtime you wish, then yeah, you could just switch between. Yeah.
Yeah, so actually in
Oh, pardon me. This will be the last question.
Okay.
Hopefully, afterward, we can take some more questions. But we have one more presenter.
yeah, so I guess in the diagram in the introduction page, so which window specifically is supposed to be DOM0 in that?
Yeah. So from my understanding, basically, this stuff over here
Okay.
would be your DOM0. Because that's like your system management. Zen is not technically a part of DOM0. DOM0 runs on top of Zen, right?
Oh, okay.
Because Zen's the hypervisor that runs everything else. That's the thing on bare metal.
Right.
And then everything else kind of runs on top of Zen. Right?
Okay.
So from my understanding, which is also minimal, I mean, I just, use the thing.
I guess I'm confused, like, why is Cubes considered like an OS if it's built on top of a hypervisor and it's like supporting distributions underneath?
That's a really good question. So the real answer is what defines a operating system, and then there's like a bunch of like answers there that I don't know the answer to those questions. So the answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But my thought would be that it sets up all of the things you need to do the operations that you wish to do. Right?
Okay.
So it sets up all the VMs for you by default. It sets up all of your storage and all that type of stuff. So that's, I think, my answer for you. I don't know who needs the mic now. You? Okay. Godspeed. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Aaron. This is super, yeah, thank you. Super interesting stuff.
Thanks for jumping in. That was a great presentation.
So we're running short on time. But we'll try to do one more. What was your name? Calliope. All right. Well, thank you for our last lightning talk for today, Calliope. And do you?
Is there more to the program after the lightning talks?
No,
This is it. This is it.
Pretty light today.
Well-
Just allowing
well-
people to get the lightning talks in.
Any discussion or like, are we clearing out of here afterwards?
Ron, how much time do we have usually post meeting?
We have until 12, but we can linger around for a few minutes after.
Okay, so about 50 minutes.
Well, I'm happy to like talk to people one off. Would you like to
Yeah. Okay. We can try to do.
If there's something to use the display for.
Sure.
I think next time we'll have to get a big timer.
Yeah. No, this is good. This will work. Can you remind me your name?
Jun Xiaoshi. Yeah, but
Jun
I
Xiao.
don't show the name up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my name. My name is Jun Xiaoshi, and I operate AS
Here, let me-
200690.
Okay. Here. Okay. Well, so we'll welcome Junshai, and I'll pass you the microphone here, and then you can take it from here.
Yeah. So I want to show something about options for high performance networking and high performance storage. Most of them are Linux Foundation project. Not what I built, but I'm using it for past few years. In terms of networking, the most thing we are most familiar with is the sockets. Socket, band, connect, send, receive, send a message, receive message. The sockets is very easy to get started. All the college students, if you study computer networking, you will learn it. So they will have the full kernel stack, TCP, IP, everything is in the kernel, but the drawback of sockets is your application will incur a copy overhead when you try to send or receive. Because if your data is in the user space, you have to copy to it. So in the recent development, I think past few years, a new thing come up called eBPF. eBPF allows you to, eBPF is something you can connect to in the kernel's network Ethernet adapter driver. So your program will be called early in the kernel driver. And there are options to offload some of the program to the hardware, but it's only supported it's only supported in this NetROM Ethernet adapter. So these cards, you can put your user's program into the card. The card will do some filtering for you. You can say, I want to drop this packet, or I want the packet coming here, some packets come out to the other port. And eBPF it's also called as a AFXDP socket. This is how you load the eBPF. But the thing I'm mostly familiar with these days is called the DPDK, or it's Data Plane Development Kit. The benefit of DPDK is you don't use the kernel anymore. Your network traffic will bypass the kernel altogether, and then all the processing is in the user space, since it's much easier to program in the user space than in the kernel. So DPDK only doesn't support everything. It only supports a subset of the hardware. There are CPU-wise, there are ARM, there are also x86. So we are mostly using Intel and AMD, but they also support ARM, and they have a new PowerPC support now. Then for Ethernet adapters, there is a limited set, but you see a lot of brands here. The most popular one are the Intel i40E, so like the 10G adapters with this driver, and NVIDIA's Connect X series. They have a lot of functionality. Say suppose it allows you to do packet filtering and packet processing. So you can say, I want to match the TCP packet and I want to do something about it, like drop it or forward it to a different port. So the benefit of the DPDK is kernel bypass, so it's hardware specific, but the drawback is you have to re-implement the full network stack in the user space. It is really, really fast. I have a program can run up to 100 gigabits per second with DPDK using 4 CPU cores. That kind of speed are not possible with sockets or with eBPF. On the storage side, the API we are most familiar with is we just call open, close, read, write. And this API, you need a file system implemented in the kernel, and they operate on files. But the drawback is just like the network sockets, you have to copy buffers between the kernel and the user space. Then a little advanced is called mmap. Mmap is you map the file in the address space just like memory, and you can possibly achieve zero copy. You can possibly achieve copy on write semantics. Then IOU ring, it turns your read and write syscalls as asynchronous, and it's also possible to achieve zero copy. But the most advanced one these days is called SPDK, Storage Performance Development Kit. SPDK is just like a DPDK, but it's for storage instead of networking. Then the way they do is all your necessary drivers is in the user space. The user space application can interact with the PCI devices, mostly means that's the MEME PCI devices. And this means you don't have system calls, you don't have interrupts, and you can still have zero copy from application. So this allows you to have much higher storage performance. I have not benchmarked this, but it's supposed to be faster than going through the user space. It's supposed to support all the NVMe device, but it depends on the device model. Some hardware there would be alignment requirement, like you can only read say 4 KB, or you need to align by 4-byte boundary. There are such kind of things, but it also allows you to make much faster storage access. Yeah, so that's what I want to say. Any questions?
Is this purely in a lab state at this point in your own usage, or do you have something that's like in a production or in like running some sort of application to then leverage this additional performance you're getting?
For DPDK and SPDK, they are both production grade. Intel and NVIDIA has been pushing them for many years. I started using them about 8 years ago when I joined NIST, and I'm still. For me, it's in lab stage, but those products, it's very mature now. They all transitioned to Linux Foundation. They used to be Intel projects.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's like how hard is this to set up?
It's I package them into Docker, but otherwise is you have to basically it take up the whole machine. So the drawback is it will take up the whole PCI device. So the network card or the NVMe, it can only be used by DPDK and SBDK. It will not coexist with other usage. So you give it a separate drive or separate network card for your high performance application, like 100G, 200G speeds.
All right, thank you, Jin Chang.
Yeah. So one more person.
Yep. I think we'll have Calliope. I see you have a lot of hardware on the table. Maybe you can give us like just an overview of what things you have and what you're interested in, and then.
Well,
you
here.
okay?
Test. Oh no, that mic is dying.
Oh.
Here.
Okay, does this seem better on the mic side? Let me know. Okay. 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 So Calliope, so the camera is over on this side, but
Pivot this, so
oh yeah, maybe that's better. So maybe just give us an overview of what you have.
No,
going on here.
that's good. Hello. So my name is Calliope. I run my second company now. Same basic purpose as I've been doing for 7 years. Making it easier to abandon the cloud, abandon Google and Microsoft, Google Docs, Gmail, Google Photos has always been a thorn in my side. And today I'm like essentially off of things. I haven't closed my old Gmails, so it's a slow trickle, but I do run everything off of a static IP address. I'm setting up my second static IP location. And I've learned so much through this process of home labbing through collaboration with HackDC. They have a large group of people who are security engineers or manage IT for school districts, and through them I learned about Proxmox. It's a super similar idea as to Qubes OS, and now I'm curious if, a piece. I'm curious if I could repurpose Qubes in a server setting. I've only seen it on laptops so far, but that could be cool. Andrew and I have also been talking a lot about NICs and how to manage, let's see, this would be the VM layer on NICs to reach this kind of Qubes-esque security model. But then have the main benefit of NixOS being a programmability, where everything in the OS has been compiled from source code that you can manage in a code base. You can roll it back, easily copy and clone it to other computers as you need to, run the normal migrations of deployment. That's the large summary. There's also been some curiosity that I've had for how to reach mass consumers whose concerns may be more like graphic design, art, music production, and as with 10 years experience of application development on Ruby on Rails, now Elixir and Phoenix, I'm thinking about how to build up some of these experiences on web technologies as a new generation. And there is a large group of people, mainly dispersed online, discussing local first software, the idea that you can still have cloud-like collaboration with people, but you do not need to sacrifice your productivity when you are on an underground subway train. You can manage your communications by an asynchronous syncing process, which sounds odd to say. the basics being that you simply need, like Git, a way to manage conflicts when a couple people are changing your record at the same time. So I think there's huge promise on that for MIDI sequencing for music, huge promise for graphic design and animation, and I'm curious to see where that goes. That's why there's such a rich array of machines here. You know, some of the programs, the state-of-the-art graphic design is Clip Studio. It only is Windows or Mac. So I'm seeing, you know, could someone build a Linux approach to replace what's there? There are places where like people aren't really building these programs anymore, and we need to, you know, we have a chance to bring them onto Linux with the next generation, or you know, Photoshop's or Adobe's going to do it and keep doing it the same way they have been. So yeah, so I'm like now on 3 or 4 OSs, but I'm really trying to combine approaches from Nix, from Cubes, and Proxmox, and especially from Framework, today's sponsor of the chaos. So you know, I'm happy to explain any of the individual pieces that you may see me using. I'm going to get a graphics tablet plugged in because that's kind of the core of this. We can have a closer look. Thank you.
Two small questions. The first one, you mentioned static IP. Do you have V4 and V6, or you dual stack, or just the V4?
I guess it is dual stack, but I do not really play around with a V6 as much as I need to, I'm sure.
And the second question on the subject of de-Googlifying. I'm avoiding Google Photos as much as possible, and in my home lab, trying to spin up an image. Do you think that's the best sort of Google Photos replacement? Do you have much of an opinion on that?
I simply go with a NAS. I don't share photos. I haven't been on social media in ages, so if it's a good audience base that this open source program has and good licensing terms, you know, read your terms of service and your license agreements. Yeah, I'd like to see, and then if we can like make a recipe that's easy to copy for deployment, I'll give it a spin for sure. Was there an earlier question that you had? IPv6. Yeah, the purpose of the static IP is email. You know, any other domain program, you can get away with dynamic IP addressing, and yeah, that's the only challenge I've found. Otherwise, like mailu.io is a Dockerified setup, and there's like 8 processes that you run in Docker containers, but mailu is like out of the box. They handle it all. So I'm looking at changing that now to a Go program called Maddie. Yeah. Aside from static IP, DNS is always just, you know, you need a full day to do your DNS records. There's no way around that.
I was just saying, like, I think I heard recently this company called Framasoft that like there's a lot of
Yes.
Google. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yes. They were making forum software, I think, that I had seen.
Like a bunch of like the Google web services products, like you know Maps. I don't know if you have all heard of Maps, Forms, etc. Like Framasoft has like free and open source versions, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know
So
what they support though. Like.
I'll echo you here. That's Framasoft is a producer of open source programs, and there are these companies that are really dedicated to the philosophy. So I do recommend Framasoft. It's been a couple of years since I've read through their offerings. I don't think I'm running anything of theirs now, but I do like them, and the programs they're building. Another one that is, people like these pretty amazing lab diagrams you see on Reddit. I'd recommend penpot.app. That's a graphic design SVG editor. Get as many as of your colleagues on that as you can, all on the same page. There's wiki.js. Oh, they're onto something there. And Zulip, I need to become serious about again, but I think that chat space is expanding also. One that you may not have heard of is Passbolt. This is a password manager. Just run it yourself. They have really slick mobile experiences, and all you need to do is keep hold of a private key file in case you need to add a new computer, do a migration or something.
And that was Pass what?
Passbolt.
Okay, I heard that correctly.
Last week I plugged in my CLI programs to all go through Passbolt now.
What do you find with Passbolt that like Vault Warden doesn't have?
What was the question again?
Vault Warden is also like a password.
Differentiation between.
So Passbolt and Vault Warden. I've been using Passbolt for so long, and the other competitors I don't have as much experience on, or the other players. I don't really see that people are competing as much as we're led to imagine. So let's compare really quickly. Browser extensions, mobile, CLI.
I believe so.
It does.
Yeah, it does.
Not that I use.
Self-hosted in Docker.
Yes.
It uses Bitwarden, like all the
The front end
extensions
stuff's
are.
all Bitwarden. The back end's just hooked to Vault Warden.
Oh, good, good, good.
Correctly, it's like a Rust implementation of the server because the server's not open source, but the client's open source for Bitwarden.
Organization and team management. Oh, good. I'll add it.
As far as I know, everyone talks about like either Bitwarden, Vault Warden. I haven't really heard of Passbolt being talked about.
I hear about both of those. Like those are like the two that I hear about.
It may also, I find that like some of these programs take hold regionally across the globe. I think there's like a European base for Passbolt. I've always found that also with Elixir programming language, we're super late to the game with that here in the U.S.
To be fair, they're not direct replacements for each other because Vault Warden leverages the existing front-end infrastructure that, the browser plugins and everything else, just so that the back end is that Rust implementation as opposed to, they do also have an implementation you can implement, but it's
Does
actually
Vault
quite heavy.
Warden allow you? So the last time, like I'm currently on KeyBass, or as some people like to call it KeyBass. Last time I looked at Bitwarden because I remember hearing that it allowed you to do like group passwords, but I believe that's a paid feature, correct? Like you can't do group passwords with the self-hosted Bitwarden.
I don't even know what a shared password would be.
I think you just create an organization.
No,
and then you can
how to implement it.
I think got the right answer. What was
you,
that?
you create an organization and then you
Oh,
add people
shared
to
vault
that
thing.
organization.
Right, so the idea would be like, you have a family that's all using the same Netflix account.
Right.
Instead of having to do what's the password every couple of days.
Can I use this chance? This seems like from my angle up here, this seems like a chance to ask people to raise your hands if you home lab. So this is like half of the room. I'd be really glad for us to circle up because the home labbing I've found is you're into it or it's like too much of an energy sink. So Any other like kind of general, maybe Linux specifics or hardware specifics, and then I'll pass this back.
I did have a quick question. Is that a Turing Pi over there?
Yes, I think it's the original Turing Pi, which runs on CM3. So I found a lot of 10 possibly broken CM3s on eBay for $60, $6 a piece.
Price point.
Listen, my wife would say that that's too much for even if it was working.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you. Yeah, you know, this is a years-long process, so I'm not going to finish today.
Yeah, certainly. I guess as we wrap up, if y'all want to come up and ask more pointed questions for any of the speakers, please do so. Let me pass this back to Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Calliope.
For you guys on DC Tech Slack, there's a fairly active home lab channel there.
Have we linked Nova Lab on DC Tech Slack?
I know that
Or it's just
Andy,
Andy has that.
Andy's on there about our meetings and such.
Okay, great. I think this was a really fun, kind of informal and a little bit spontaneous meeting. Hope you heard something that you thought was interesting. Some of the things are interesting. I think we've got maybe about 15 minutes left that we can conclude the meeting, but if you want to talk to someone that was giving a talk, one of the lightning talks, and you want to follow up, check out some of the hardware that we have up here on the front table. I think that would be great. But I think otherwise, I think that's it for this meeting. Darren, do you have last thing?
It's time to be social as we have a few minutes today. Drink the coffee I brought because, you know, I don't want to waste my money. That came straight out of my coffers. There's plenty of coffee left. Introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. You know, that's part of building communities, you know, just making that connection. You never know who you're going to get connected with that will be a good friend, possibly help you in the future. And you possibly are able to help them. So we thank everybody for coming out on a Saturday. We know Saturdays are valuable for everybody, but this, to me, is a very enjoyable way to spend a little bit of time together. So thank you very much.